The scratching began at 2:17 a.m. Sharp, deliberate, like a nail dragged against wood, slow, then faster. Ethan's eyes opened in the dark. For a moment he thought it was the wind brushing the siding again. But the sound came from inside. Under the bed. He stayed still, breath shallow. The room was cold, too cold for October. Streetlights spilled through the blinds, cutting thin orange lines across the floor. Dust floated in the glow, drifting lazily toward the sound. Fresh. He sat up, every muscle tense. The wooden floor creaked beneath his weight, and the sound stopped, like it was listening back. His phone clock blinked, its blue light the only heartbeat in the silence. Probably the pipes, he whispered, not believing it. He leaned down slowly, gripping the edge of the mattress. The smell of old wood and dust rose from the floorboards. He lowered his head, eyes straining into the dark beneath. Nothing. Just shadow. But the air felt heavier down there, dense, like it was hiding something. He reached for his flashlight on the nightstand and clicked it on. The beam flickered, then steadied. He swept it across the floor. Nothing moved. Until he saw it, a line. No, not a line. A carving. A word, crudely scratched into the wood beneath the bed. Remember. The letters were jagged, uneven, and fresh. The edges still pale against the older wood. Ethan's breath caught. He hadn't seen that word in years. Not since. A sudden thump from the wall froze him. He scrambled back, flashlight trembling in his hand. The sound had come from behind his headboard, deep and hollow, like something shifting inside the wall. His chest tightened. Every instinct told him to leave the room, to run, but he couldn't. Something about that word rooted him there. Remember what? He whispered. The silence stretched. The kind that hums in your ears when even the house is holding its breath. Then came the scratching again, faint, steady, but this time not from under the bed. It was beneath the floor. He knelt down, pressing his ear to the boards. The sound grew clearer, more deliberate. Someone, or something, was tracing those same letters deeper into the wood. He pulled back, heart hammering. For a moment, he thought he heard breathing from below, slow, human. He staggered to his feet, light shaking across the room. Dust drifted from the ceiling, stirred by something unseen. Every sound felt amplified, the hum of the fridge downstairs, the tick of the hallway clock, his own heartbeat loud in his throat. He forced himself toward the bed again, shining the light where the word had been. The carving looked different now. A new letter forming beneath it. Remember? Ethan stumbled backward, the flashlight slipping from his hand and clattering to the floor. The beam rolled, catching the space under the bed for one last moment. Nothing moved. And then, from somewhere deep beneath the floorboards, faint but unmistakable, came the sound again. Fresh. It wasn't the word that scared him. It was the sound that followed, still scratching, from somewhere deeper below. The sound didn't stop when morning came. It just changed. Now it echoed faintly through the vents, a whisper of scraping carried from somewhere deeper. Ethan hadn't slept. He sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the word burned into his thoughts. Remember me. The sunlight through the blinds did nothing to chase the chill from the room. By noon, curiosity won over fear. He followed the sound through the hallway, down the narrow stairs, until he stood before the basement door. He hadn't been down there in years. Not since his mother's accident. Not since the house had gone quiet. He turned the knob. It resisted, swollen with age, then gave way with a slow, reluctant groan. The smell hit first, damp concrete, mildew, and something metallic underneath. Dust motes swirled in the thin beam of light spilling from the stairwell. He descended one creaking step at a time. Each footfall seemed to echo too long, bouncing off unseen walls. The scratching was louder here, but distant, like it came from the other side of the foundation. The basement looked frozen in time. Boxes stacked high, old furniture covered in sheets, a washing machine yellowed with age. Ethan swept his flashlight across the room. The beam caught on something glinting near the far wall, a cluster of picture frames, wrapped in brittle newspaper. He knelt and pulled one free. Dust coated the glass, but beneath it was a photo of a family, his family, standing in the front yard. his father's arm around his mother, a small boy between them. At least, that's what he thought. Until he saw the name scrawled on the back, Daniel, age 7. He froze. The handwriting was his mother's. He looked back at the photo again, really looked this time. The boy's hair was shorter, his eyes darker, the smile wrong somehow. He sifted through the rest of the photos. Different birthdays, family trips, holidays. All featuring the same child. The same face that looked like his but wasn't. A cold realization crept through him. The boy wasn't Ethan. The scraping noise returned, sharper now, almost impatient. He followed it past the shelves, to a section of wall discolored by water damage. He pressed his hand against it. Hollow. The sound came again from inside. He found a rusted crowbar near the workbench and wedged it into the crack between the panels. With a strained pull, the board gave way, spilling dust and splinters across the floor. Behind it lay another box, small, metal, and sealed with a faded sticker that read, Private. He hesitated, then pried it open. Inside were more photographs, but these were different. Grainy. Unsettling. A hospital room. Wires. A boy asleep in a bed, pale and still. Beside him, another child, identical, staring straight into the camera. Ethan's throat went dry. His fingers trembled as he lifted the final photograph. It wasn't of a child at all. It was of a grave. The same last name etched into the stone. His own. He dropped the photo. It hit the concrete softly, face down. Above him, the pipes groaned. A single drop of water fell from the ceiling, landing on his wrist. Cold. He looked up. The scratching had stopped. In its place, Fanuc. 3 slow, measured raps, from the door at the top of the basement stairs. And then a voice, calm and unfamiliar. Are you the boy from Ridgeway Street? Ethan froze halfway up the stairs. The voice on the other side of the door was calm, low, almost patient. Are you the boy from Ridgeway Street? For a moment he thought he'd imagined it. But then came another knock, 3 soft, deliberate raps that echoed down the basement steps. He swallowed hard, every instinct screaming to stay quiet. The air felt heavier again, the same way it had the night before. Dust drifted lazily through the beam of light from the crack beneath the door. Whoever stood there wasn't leaving. Ethan finally forced himself to move. His hand shook as he reached for the handle. The old hinges groaned when he opened the door a few inches. A man stood in the doorway, rain dripping from the brim of a dark coat. His face was half hidden beneath the shadow of his hat, but his eyes, pale gray, sharp, caught the light. Behind him, the evening sky was sinking into a wash of blue and amber. Who are you? Ethan managed, his voice low. The man didn't answer right away. He studied Ethan like someone comparing an old photograph to the real thing. Then he said, You look just like him. Like who? The other one. The words hit like a chill. Ethan opened the door wider, confusion cutting through fear. What are you talking about? The man glanced past him into the dark hallway. You shouldn't have opened that wall, he said softly. It was sealed for a reason. Ethan stepped back. How do you know about that? The man reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small, a silver key. Its surface was scratched, but a single word had been carved into the metal. Remember. He held it out between 2 fingers. This belongs to you. Or it used to. Ethan hesitated before taking it. The metal felt cold, too cold. What is this? Think of it as a door, the man said. One that leads to the truth you've been trying to bury. Ethan looked down at the key, then back up. But the man had already turned away, heading toward the end of the street. The rain had started again, thin needles tapping the pavement. Wait! Ethan called after him. What truth? Who are you? The stranger stopped under a flickering streetlight. For a second, his face was clearer, lined, weary, familiar in a way Ethan couldn't place. I knew your mother, he said. And I knew what she tried to protect you from. Lightning flashed behind him. In that instant, Ethan saw the reflection of something glinting beneath the man's coat, a badge, maybe, or a locket. Then the darkness swallowed him whole. Ethan stood in the doorway, drenched in silence. The key gleamed in his hand, the word remember cutting faintly into his palm. Somewhere deep below, the house creaked, the sound of settling wood or something shifting underneath. He turned the key over once more. On its backside, another engraving caught the light, numbers this time. Coordinates. Ethan's pulse quickened. He recognized the pattern. They pointed to somewhere he hadn't been since he was a child. The basement. He looked back down the stairwell, where darkness waited like an open mouth. He didn't want to go back down there. But the scratching had started again. And this time, it was coming from behind the shelves. The scratching led him straight to the shelves. Ethan moved them aside one by one, the wood screeching across the concrete. Dust filled the air, catching the weak glow of his flashlight. Behind the last shelf, the wall looked different, darker, smoother, as if it had been replaced more recently than the rest. He pressed his ear to it. Silence. Then, faintly, that same measured sound. Scratch, scratch. The key in his pocket felt heavier. He pulled it out and ran his thumb across the engraving. Remember. The metal seemed to vibrate faintly, as though responding to the sound behind the wall. He noticed a thin line along the concrete, almost invisible unless the light hit just right. A seam. His pulse quickened. He searched for a handle, a switch, anything. His fingers found a small indentation near the baseboard, covered in grime. He knelt down and slid the key into it. It fit perfectly. The click was soft but deep, echoing through the wall like a sigh. The section of concrete shifted forward an inch, releasing a gust of stale air. Ethan coughed, pushing the hidden panel aside. The darkness beyond was absolute, a void that swallowed the light. He raised his flashlight and stepped inside. The small chamber was no bigger than a closet, but every inch of it was alive with strange details. Strings of red yarn crisscrossed the walls, connecting photographs, scraps of paper, and Polaroids. Old tape recorders sat stacked on a wooden table, each labeled in neat handwriting. Session 1, E, Session 2, D, Session 3, Mother. He moved closer, shining the beam across the photographs. Some were of the house, taken from outside at night. Others, of him, sleeping, working, staring out a window. Each marked with a date. Someone had been watching him for years. Ethan's stomach tightened. He reached for one of the tapes and squinted at the label. Session 1, E. His initials. He pressed play. Static hissed, then a faint child's voice emerged, shaky, uncertain. My name is Ethan. I saw him again last night. The pause. Then an adult voice, calm, professional. Who did you see? The boy. The one who looks like me. Ethan's hand trembled. He stopped the tape, but the sound didn't stop. The child's voice kept speaking from another recorder, one he hadn't touched. I told Mom, but she said he's gone. She said he's not real. He turned, light darting across the room. The other recorders began switching on by themselves, one after another. The chamber filled with overlapping voices, his own words as a child, pleading, crying, repeating the same phrase, he's still in the house. The flashlight flickered. He slammed the power switch on the nearest recorder, silencing it. The others stopped too, leaving a vacuum of silence so thick it rang in his ears. Then a whisper, barely audible, right beside him. You shouldn't have opened the door. Ethan spun around. No one. Just the cold air pressing against his skin. The flashlight steadied again, its beam landing on something he hadn't noticed before. A mirror, half covered by an old sheet in the corner. He lifted the cloth away. The reflection stared back at him, pale, wide-eyed, trembling. But behind his shoulder, in the glass, stood someone else. A boy. Smiling. Ethan dropped the sheet and stumbled back. The mirror wobbled, the edges rattling. His breath came in short gasps. The light flickered once more, and the boy was gone. Only Ethan's reflection remained. But from the recorder still spinning, one last phrase whispered through the static. You're not supposed to be here. The whisper lingered long after the recorder fell silent. Ethan stood frozen in the darkness, heart hammering against his ribs. The air in the hidden room had turned cold enough to sting his skin. The mirror reflected only his pale face. No boy, no shadow, just the tremor in his hands. He picked up the recorder again. The tape inside had nearly run its course, spinning slowly. A final click echoed, and then another voice emerged, older this time, quieter, weary. "Ethan," it said, "if you're hearing this, it means the barrier's breaking again." He frowned. The voice was male, familiar in tone but aged, distorted by time. "You must remember what really happened in the basement. The memories you carry, they aren't all yours." Ethan's breath caught. The static swallowed the rest. He stumbled back into the main room, the tape still clutched in his fist. The flashlight beam danced across the floor, grazing the edges of the photographs and papers pinned along the wall. Each one seemed to shift slightly, like the faces within were alive beneath the glass. He found another recorder labeled Session 2T. The letter matched the name from the old photos, Daniel. His twin. He hesitated only a moment before pressing play. A child's laugh filled the room, light and distant, followed by the same adult voice from before. "Daniel, tell me what happened after the fall." There was a pause, then a trembling answer. "He pushed me." Ethan froze. The adult voice continued, steady. "Who pushed you, Daniel?" Another pause. Then the boy whispered, "Ethan did." The tape hissed. The sound cut abruptly, leaving only the faint mechanical whir of the recorder. Ethan's knees weakened. The edges of his vision blurred. He remembered flashes, his mother screaming, the smell of smoke, the sharp sting of rain on his face as someone pulled him away from the house. But none of it fit together. None of it felt true. He pressed his palms to his temples, trying to force the images into place. No, that didn't happen. It didn't. But the more he denied it, the clearer it became. The sound of a hand slipping, the echo of a scream, the cold silence that followed. The flashlight flickered again. For a heartbeat, the reflection in the mirror returned, but this time it wasn't a boy. It was him, older, harder, eyes dark and hollow. The reflection moved when he didn't, stepping closer until it filled the frame. "You took something that wasn't yours," the reflection whispered, its voice overlapping with his own. "A life. A name. A memory." Ethan stumbled back, colliding with the table. The recorders fell to the ground, their buttons snapping. Static filled the room like a storm, voices merging into one. Laughter, crying, shouting, until it all bled into a single phrase. "He doesn't remember. He doesn't remember." Ethan clutched the edge of the table for balance. His reflection flickered again, the glass warping like water. And then it was gone, replaced by the sight of the hidden room itself, but viewed from another angle, as if he were standing behind his own shoulder. He blinked. The vision vanished. Silence. On the floor, one of the recorders clicked back to life on its own, tape unwinding slowly. A new voice, softer, female this time. "Ethan, if you ever find this, look in the wardrobe upstairs. The truth is in the letter." His mother's voice. The words sent a chill through him, deeper than fear. He turned toward the stairway, the house groaning above him. The scratching had stopped now. Only one sound remained, the faint, rhythmic creak of the wardrobe door swinging open somewhere upstairs. The creak came again, soft, steady, rhythmic. Ethan froze at the bottom of the basement stairs. The sound echoed from above, like an old door swaying in a slow, patient breeze. His mother's voice still rang in his ears, "Look in the wardrobe upstairs." He took a breath and climbed. Each step groaned beneath his weight. The house seemed to listen, the air heavier with every floor he ascended. When he reached the landing, the corridor stretched before him in dim amber light. At the end stood the old wardrobe, tall, wooden, carved with faded floral patterns. The door rocked gently on its hinges, creaking open and closed, though no wind stirred. He approached slowly, flashlight trembling in his hand. The wardrobe had belonged to his mother. He remembered hiding inside it as a child, the smell of lavender and dust, her voice calling his name from the hallway. But now, that memory felt like it belonged to someone else, like a scene he'd only watched, not lived. He reached out and caught the swinging door. It stopped with a faint thud. Inside, a handful of her clothes still hung limp and forgotten. Beneath them, a small wooden box sat wedged in the corner. He crouched and lifted it out. The box was lighter than he expected, bound by an old leather strap. When he unfastened it, a folded letter lay inside, sealed with brittle wax. His mother's handwriting curled across the envelope, elegant, unmistakable. His fingers shook as he tore the seal. "Ethan," it began. "If you're reading this, it means the memory has returned. I hoped it never would. I hoped the treatments would hold. But nothing truly stays buried." The flashlight dimmed slightly, shadows thickening around him. He continued reading. "You were part of something that should never have been done. The project was meant to save one child, but it broke both. Daniel was sick, and the doctors believed they could transfer what made you strong into him. They said it was harmless. But when the experiment failed, you were left with pieces of his mind. His fears. His memories." Ethan's stomach twisted. The words blurred. "You were both my sons. But only one of you woke up that night." The light flickered again. He read the next line aloud, his voice cracking. "Only one of you was meant to survive." His throat tightened. The edges of the letter trembled in his hands. "When they took you home, they told me to pretend. They said the confusion would fade, that the memories would settle into one identity. But the house remembers, Ethan. The walls, the floor, the bed, they all carry what we tried to forget. When the scratching starts again, it means he's still trying to come back." Ethan's pulse roared in his ears. The letter slipped from his fingers, landing softly on the floorboards. The wardrobe door began to creak once more, opening wider than before. A faint whisper slid from inside, barely a breath, yet clear enough to make his heart stop. "Why did you take my place?" Ethan staggered back. The flashlight flickered, sputtered, then went out completely. He groped in the darkness, his hand brushing against something cold, the mirror on the opposite wall. In the dim reflection, he saw two figures. Himself, and another standing just behind, eyes glinting in the dark. Ethan turned, but there was only emptiness. Then, from beneath the bed upstairs, the scratching began again. Louder this time, relentless, pulling him toward the room he feared most. And beneath that sound, barely audible, came a voice that almost sounded like his own. "Come back down. There's still one more door to open." The scratching grew louder with every step Ethan took toward his bedroom. It echoed through the walls, rhythmic and deliberate, not the random noise of pipes or wood. It was a call. The summons. Each scrape felt like a heartbeat buried beneath the floor. He stopped at the doorway. The room looked different now. Shadows stretched longer than they should have. The air shimmered faintly, thick with dust and cold. His bed sat in the middle, sheets rumpled, the word remember still carved faintly into the wood beneath. The sound stopped. Then, softly, something knocked from below. 3 short taps, just like at the basement door. Ethan's chest tightened. He knelt slowly, hands trembling as he lifted the edge of the bed skirt. Darkness. Just darkness. But the floor looked uneven, as if something had been tampered with beneath the boards. He grabbed the flashlight from the dresser and shined it underneath. The beam caught a faint outline, a seam running across the wooden planks. A trapdoor. His pulse quickened. He reached for the edge and pulled. The board resisted, then gave way with a dry snap, sending a gust of stale, cold air into his face. A narrow set of steps descended into blackness. "Another room," he whispered. The smell hit next, damp, metallic, faintly sweet, like rust and decay. He hesitated at the edge, staring down into the void. The letter's words echoed in his head. "Only one of you was meant to survive." He took the first step. Then another. The flashlight beam trembled across the walls. Smooth concrete again, but lined this time with dozens of mirrors. Some cracked, others fogged, each reflecting fragments of his light. They formed a tunnel of reflections, endless versions of himself staring back, wide-eyed, pale, uncertain. At the bottom, the steps ended in a small chamber. The air was freezing. His breath came out in faint white clouds. He swept the light across the room. The mirrors continued, arranged in a perfect circle. In the center sat an old wooden chair, and upon it, a single tape recorder. The label read "Final Session." His fingers hovered over the play button, hesitating only a second before pressing down. Static. Then his own voice, calm, older, weary. If you've come this far, then you finally remember what you did. He swallowed. Who are you? He whispered. The voice continued. You weren't supposed to wake up. They gave me your memories, Ethan. Your name. Your life. You took mine. The tape clicked off. Every mirror in the room flickered. His reflection rippled like water, faces shifting, one moment his own, the next, Daniel's. Each version stared back at him with accusing eyes. He stumbled backward, the beam darting wildly. The reflections began moving out of sync, mouths opening, whispering words he couldn't understand. Then one stepped forward. Not in the glass, out of it. The sound was like ice cracking. A figure emerged from the reflection, barefoot, pale, dripping as if pulled through water. His face was Ethan's, but younger. I remember everything, the figure said, voice trembling between rage and sorrow. You took my life. Ethan backed away, hitting the wall. No, it wasn't me. It wasn't real. The figure tilted its head. You buried me. The lights in the mirrors flared white. Ethan shielded his eyes, heart pounding. When he looked again, the figure was gone. But in his reflection, every mirror showed the same thing. His own face, staring back, whispering in unison. Tell the truth. He dropped the flashlight. The chamber plunged into darkness. From somewhere deep behind the mirrors came one final sound, the creak of wood shifting, as if something were crawling back up toward the room above. And then, faintly, his mother's voice, echoing through the dark. Ethan, it's time to wake up. The voice lingered in the dark long after it stopped echoing. Ethan, it's time to wake up. He blinked slowly, disoriented. The cold from the chamber seeped into his skin, but something had changed. The mirrors were silent now, the reflections still. His breath came in shallow gasps as he reached for the fallen flashlight. The beam sputtered weakly to life, slicing through the heavy blackness. The chair in the center of the room was empty. The tape recorder was gone. Only the mirrors remained, and the faint outline of words forming on their surfaces, carved slowly from the inside. The glass cracked with each stroke, spelling a phrase Ethan could barely read. Look beneath. He turned toward the staircase, but the trapdoor above had sealed shut. No light seeped through. He was trapped. Panic clawed at his throat. He pressed his palms against the wall, searching for a weakness, a seam, anything. Then, in the stillness, a faint scraping began again. Not from the mirrors this time, but from the ground beneath his feet. He crouched low, brushed aside the dust, and found a square panel in the floor, carved with the same crooked handwriting he'd seen before. The truth waits below. His heart thudded. Another layer. Another secret. He wedged his fingers into the gap and pulled. The wood cracked, releasing a gust of freezing air that smelled faintly of earth and iron. Below was not another staircase, but dirt. Loose, freshly turned soil. He reached down and touched something smooth, not stone, not metal. Plastic. A small box wrapped in brittle tape. He tore it open, revealing old photographs, a child's drawing, and another folded note stained with dark blotches. The drawing showed two boys, one taller, one smaller, standing outside a house that looked exactly like his. Behind them, a shadow towered over both, its face blank. He opened the note. They made me forget. But I remember now. The voice isn't hers, it's mine. Ethan froze. The handwriting was his. A sound came from above, wood groaning, footsteps pacing across the floorboards of his bedroom. Slow, deliberate, heavy. Someone was up there. He stuffed the photos into his jacket and climbed the narrow stairs, pushing against the trapdoor until it splintered open. The bedroom looked untouched, except for one detail. The bed was gone. In its place was a hollow space in the floor, perfectly square, lined with stone. Etched into the center was the same message he'd just read in the note, only larger, deeper, cut into the foundation itself. I remember now. Ethan knelt, tracing the grooves with his fingers. The stone was cold, pulsing faintly beneath his touch, almost alive. As he leaned closer, something glimmered inside the carving. Metal. A latch. He hesitated, then pulled it. The floor shifted with a slow mechanical grind, revealing a hidden compartment beneath the message. Inside was a small glass vial filled with a thick, dark liquid, and a key attached to a chain. Tied around the vial's neck was a scrap of paper, almost disintegrated. The words were barely legible. "One of us must drink to end this." The air in the room thickened. The voice, his mother's, his own, he couldn't tell anymore, whispered from everywhere at once. "Finish what you started." The walls groaned. The floor trembled. The mirrors below began to hum, vibrating like living things. Ethan clutched the vial, heart pounding. The light flickered out. Then, a whisper from beneath the floorboards. "Ethan, don't let him out." The voice wasn't his mother's this time. It was the other one, the boy from the mirror. And somewhere deep beneath the bed, far below the house, something started moving.